Welcome to Alaska Weather, a production of Alaska Public Media and the National Weather Service, Alaska Region. Produced and broadcast daily from the studios of KAKM, Alaska Weather provides complete forecasts, public, marine, and aviation for all of Alaska. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
The National Weather Service.
Good Friday, everyone. I'm meteorologist Dave Snider with you on this 13th of February. As always, we encourage you to stay up to date with your local weather information in your community or village by listening to NOAA Weather Radio, Marine VHF, going to the website weather.gov/Alaska, the weather info line 800-472-0391, or find us online at NWS Alaska on Facebook, NWS Alaska on Twitter, or on YouTube. In the afternoon, you'll get your daily afternoon map briefing after this show on alaskapublic.org or on YouTube using the channel AKwx TV, which is Alaska Weather TV for short. You can find this complete broadcast there, so check that out if you miss a section. Let's take you ahead into the future a little bit longer than we normally talk on this show. We're going to go out 6 to 10 days from now, so this would put us at February 19th, 20th, 21st, and 22nd. So this will be end of next week and into the next weekend there. We're talking about above normal temperatures across a large part of Alaska. And you remember we've been talking about the jet stream just about, well, we always talk about the jet stream, but we've been talking about that pronounced trough of low pressure across a large part of Alaska and just south. That's been keeping us cold in the north and active in the Gulf. Well, if you look way out there across the lower 48 states, you can see a lot of cold colors there. For us, it's the warm colors, and this means probability of above normal temperatures for February 19th, 20th, 21st, 23rd, 22nd, and 23rd. And a very good chance that around Bethel, Norton Sound up to Nome, we'll have warmer weather. And there's a little bit less of a chance out toward the Alcan border, but you can see most of Alaska has that higher probability. As far as the East Coast and parts of the upper Midwest go, not so much. It's because the jet stream is taking a big rise up to the north and then dropping down and allowing the cold to move out to the east. Well, with the warmth and during that period also comes a chance for above normal precipitation for not all parts of the state this time, but a large part of the west coast, especially 40 to 50% there, including northern sections of the Yukon-Kuskokwim Delta all the way to Seward Peninsula and the Chukchi Sea coast. Lesser chances of above normal precipitation as far east as Fairbanks, and then slightly below normal precipitation for parts of southeast. Again, same problem. We have a huge rise in the jet stream ridge and then crashing into the lower 48 states. Just keep that in mind though, because starting this weekend, many places along the Gulf Coast and around southern and western Alaska are going to start this warming process that will last probably well into next week. So a lot of things are changing there. And if we look out across the North Pacific, this is kind of this is the globe, this is the equator here, here's Hawaii, here's the Gulf Coast of Alaska, and Alaska way up on the top of the planet, of course, and the west coast. You can see a large batch of moisture here in the Pacific, and all this has been circulating around thanks to that low pressure system in the upper atmosphere. This is going to start creeping northward here, and with that southerly flow comes much warmer and possibly wetter weather for many places, especially the west coast of Alaska. So here's a look at the Bering Sea satellite picture now. We can see that circulation that's all wrapped up in the North Pacific now, and that's been dragging that north and easterly flow off the continent, keeping many in the YK in the west pretty cold, keeping persistent snow showers going across the Aleutians. And now we start to see some interruptions out here in the west. A little bit of a sign of change, a larger circulation here across the West Pacific, and this is starting to move northward a little bit. So this is going to start to add more moisture to our weather picture. Across Alaska, you can still see several circulations working up the eastern Gulf Coast, one of those running right through southeast today and just wringing out the rain for places like Yakutat and Juneau. Anywhere from 6 to 7/10 of an inch of rain there. Juneau picked up about a ½ inch today. Kodiak also pretty soggy there. Sitka about 7/10. Yakutat about 6/10. Areas around Anchorage were fairly dry. Clouds moved back in today. As this circulation here across the northern Gulf continues to get closer to the Kenai Peninsula, we're going to see the winds probably pick up a little bit more around the Cook Inlet heading to the weekend. That probably means warmer weather for many in south central. Up to the north, fairly dry conditions today. Not a whole lot to talk about really, except for maybe a little more sunshine where you are across the lower, middle, and even upper Yukon Valley. And perhaps some of that warmer weather is welcome news to dogs and mushers alike as they continue moving toward Fairbanks. Across the Arctic coast, the winds seem to be settling down, but the cold air is locked in place. Deadhorse began the day around 40 below this morning, so just bone chilling. own chilling cold there. The weather map shows a 986 millibar low out across the central and western Gulf. That's still working its way northward. The occlusion and the frontal boundaries working through southeast today. We've seen some light snow across the Alcan border near Tok and Northway, and some light rain across the Alaska Peninsula, and some heavier rain out around Dutch Harbor today. That system will continue to be in place, keeping snow showers possible all the way from St. Lawrence Island through the St. Matthew Island waters. Winds and some snow showers for the Pribilofs as well as the central Aleutians through the nighttime hours. Low pressure will be just east of Kodiak Island heading into tonight and early tomorrow morning. The front still intact for just a little bit longer, but as it's dying out, snow is possible. Lighter accumulations there around the Copper River Basin. Most stay dry across the Yukon Valley and southward into the Kuskokwim Valley. For the Kobuk and Noatak valleys and up across the western Brooks Range, there may be some light and accumulating snow. Some of that getting a little close to Kotzebue perhaps. Areas of blowing snow are possible around the Brooks Range summits. Otherwise, some areas of fog across the eastern Beaufort seacoast. Heading into Saturday, really more of the same for the Brooks Range. It looks like snow showers will linger around. Most of what we'll see in the Copper River Basin should be fairly light. Frontal boundaries dying out there. We still have a persistent south and westerly flow into southeast Alaska and south central. The low pressure starts to drift a little bit more over the Barren Islands and the Kenai Peninsula. And that could keep the wind going, especially around the Portage Valley and around Cook Inlet. So aviators and mariners alike, pay attention to the wind forecast tomorrow. As we look at St. Matthew and Pribilofs, snow and even some blowing snow will be possible as the ice edge continues to drop southward. We'll look at that in a little bit. And at 993 millibars, another circulation just south of Adak and Atka is tied into a trough of low pressure sitting on the Bering Sea coast. For Sunday, low pressure is strengthening, 981 millibars. The level drops, and that means it's strengthening there. It's tighter wind gradient for areas south of the Kenai Peninsula to Kodiak Island and across the Alaska Peninsula. Watch for turbulence if you're flying on Sunday in those areas. As we get into the Yukon-Kuskokwim Delta, areas of snow showers are expected for the south and west. Relatively dry conditions and maybe even cloud-free conditions for many north of the Yukon into the Brooks Range. There may be some stronger winds there around the Chukchi Sea coast with high pressure parked just north of Barrow at 1,041 millibars. Patchy snow showers across the eastern Alaska Range into the Copper River Basin. And southeast may see a little more sunshine there. Meanwhile, a stronger surge of warmer and wetter weather is also moving northward on the leading edge of that frontal boundary for Sunday. Here's a look at the temperatures we saw today, already warming up around Haida Gwaii, up to 50 degrees there. Many areas in southeast made it well into the 40s this afternoon, including Juneau, Sitka, Ketchikan, and Metlakatla. Metlakatla, in fact, made it up to 54 today. So pretty mild and toasty for you. 41 in Yakutat, 30s and 40s around Prince William Sound. Looks like Whittier was up to 28 today. Homer and Seward both in the mid-30s. Middleton Island was hovering in the low 40s there. Anchorage 30 degrees, Talkeetna 36. Up around Gulkana, it was 11 degrees above zero with Northway and Tok a little bit closer to zero. 5 above in Fairbanks, 3 above in Eagle, so getting warmer there for you as well and for all the dogs and mushers alike. 11 below in Fort Yukon and Arctic Village, 17 below in Anaktuvuk Pass, anywhere from 25 to 35 below across the Arctic coast. And again, we said Dead Horse started the day at 40 below. Around Kotzebue Sound, from 5 above to 5 below across most of Kotzebue Sound there. Tin City was 11 below, 16 above in Nome, Unalakleet, and areas around Galena, up toward Ruby, all in the teens today. Grayling also in the upper teens. McGrath was 14 after seeing temperatures today rising to about, I think it was about 15 above earlier this afternoon for the daytime high temperature. About 20 there in Bethel. Nunivak Island was showing 27, 3 in Gamble. The Pribilofs in the mid to upper 20s. Looks like Bristol Bay temperatures were in the upper 30s, 30s and 40s for the Alaska Peninsula. Sandpoint was 43. And way out in Kiska, out toward Attu, temperatures there made it into the mid-30s today as the winds were switching around Kodiak Island in the 30s and 40s. For the interior tonight, look for sub-zero readings once again, from 0 to about 10 below in the Fairbanks North Pole area, to 16 below around Fort Yukon, to 25 below in Barrow out across the west, and to Nome 5 above. Shishmaref looking at 15 below. Southwestern Alaska in the teens to nearly 20 degrees around Bristol Bay. The Alaska Peninsula easily above freezing in just about all areas except for areas east of Port Heiden. Most of those places will be a little bit colder. 36 around Kodiak, southeast in the lower 40s and staying there. 20s in Prince William Sound, south central in the lower 20s as well, with highs tomorrow going above freezing for all of south central. The Susitna Valley in the mid-30s around Talkeetna. Low teens for Fairbanks and still getting warmer in Fort Yukon with a high of 5. Barrow looking at 16 below. Kaktovik about the same. Prudhoe Bay and Dead Horse also hovering in the negative mid-teens. 15 above in Nome, southwestern Alaska. Teens and 20s there with King Salmon at 31. Kodiak 42. and 30s and 40s for the peninsula and the Aleutians, with the Pribilofs holding just above freezing, just by a hair, 33. Flying weather then, we'll see some patchy IFR with that light snow and snow showers across the Brooks Range summits tomorrow. Most of that will be drying up as we go throughout our day. A wide area of MBFR across the central and eastern Gulf, patchy IFR on north and southern sections of southeast tomorrow, and along the Wrangell-St. Elias region, especially east of Cordova out toward Yakutat. We'll expect IFR conditions to develop and stay in place across Kodiak Island, with low pressure very close to home for you, and around False Pass and points north and west toward the Pribilofs, IFR all the way up to St. Matthew, and around Adak and Atka for tomorrow. Here's your pass conditions. Then Anaktuvuk and Adigan Pass likely hold at IFR through a good part of the daytime tomorrow. Maybe some improvements toward the end of the day as some of the snow starts to wind down. It doesn't look like we'll see a whole lot of IFR in the western Alaska range as we get into the weekend, but to watch for some changes there by Sunday into Monday perhaps. VFR to MVFR conditions developing during the day. The same goes for Rainy Pass. Expect MVFR late in the day. Windy Pass, we expect to see visual flight rule throughout your Saturday, transitioning toward MVFR for Isabel Pass during the daytime. Mentasta Pass looking okay for your Saturday flying. Tanita Pass, also visual flight rules expected there. And as we look southward toward Portage, marginal flight conditions there with, again, a better chance for some snow showers in the region during the day, kind of mixed. And MVFR for Chilkoot and White Pass for your Saturday. Freezing levels really don't see much of a change at the surface, but you can see that warmer air is taking over more of the Gulf of Alaska and southwestern Alaska, with levels up to 4,000 feet around Bristol Bay, and now moving north of the Dixon entrance to as high as 4,000 feet. The icing potential hovers around 2,000 feet across the Brooks Range, and then look at this moisture just snaking its way all the way out into the Bering as that low pressure system is kind of sloshing Pacific moisture back over southern and western Alaska. Most of southeast should be pretty clear tomorrow as far as icing threats go. For south central, a large area there generally above 7,000 feet and above 4,000 feet for the central and western Aleutians. Let's take a look at that jet stream now. Remember how I said we had that large trough of low pressure out across the Pacific? Well, the storm track for weeks and weeks and weeks has been well to our south, and it has been working its way into the west. Well, now that trough, this dip right here is what we're talking about, is backing up. It's kind of moving westward a little bit, and in its place is warm and wet air from the Pacific that's pushing that northward, and all that's working its way into Alaska. That also brings that storm track a little bit more in the direction of the Gulf of Alaska. So we get the warm and wet flow, stronger winds aloft, and all those things kind of energize the surface weather a little bit and put more of the ingredients into more of the right places for Alaska to get more wetter, more active weather across south central, southwest, and maybe especially western Alaska, as we saw in that 6 to 10 day outlook earlier. The colder air, that's being shunted off to the east, so the really deep Arctic cold that's been plaguing the interior, you might start catching a little bit more of a break there. And that's what we saw just turning most of the Midwest and the east coast of the lower 48 very cold and very blue on those maps just a while ago. At 9,000 feet, we see that circulation backing up over the Barren Islands for your Saturday. Winds across the Gulf, not too bad, 25 to 30 knots or so. We have an onshore flow from the south and west to southeastern Alaska. Interior winds are running around 10 to 15 knots or so. And another weaker circulation just south and west of Nikolsky coming in from the south, moving over the Alaska Peninsula, and then easterlies pick up around Nunivak Island, and they drift over about 15 to 20 knots or so. At 3,000 feet north, and easterly winds are still blowing that cold offshore, the YK Delta, about 10 to 15 knots or so. There's our circulation of low pressure again in the Gulf. It's starting to work its way westward. We have a little bit of a stronger flow, though, right here from Cordova and southward. Those winds really max out around 50 knots or so, so watch for some turbulence moving over the northern Gulf as we go through tomorrow, and maybe even on Saturday as well, into the Portage Valley and Prince William Sound. Low pressure south of Adak, around 10 to 35 knots, at the strongest on the western side of that. And winds still coming in across the eastern Gulf, 25 to 30 knots or so into southeastern Alaska. Turbulence potential then, we're going to watch this area in the northern Gulf develop. Right now I've drawn some of the higher threats probably around Prince William Sound, the Portage Valley, maybe even Anchorage. A lot of that could be below 6,000 feet and even lower for some of the stronger winds. We'll have to watch and see how that develops around the Barren Islands as well. Remember, that area of low pressure is going to be just turning right over the Kenai Mountains and over some of those channeled gaps and passes. You aviators and mariners know a lot better than I do where those special places are that see the strongest winds, but watch those places tomorrow. From St. Matthew all the way southward toward the central Aleutians, below 5,000 feet, watch for at least some isolated moderate in those areas. Below 4,000 feet if you're flying eastward into Canada. And the Chukchi Seacoast into Kotzebue Sound below 4,000 feet, especially the western tip around Point Hope and Point Lay. probably looking at some occasional moderate there. We're going to talk about the ice edge here in just a few minutes, but I'll give you a sneak peek. The leading edge now of the thin strips, it's within about 7 nautical miles of St. Paul. Stick around, I'll have the rest of your marine forecast here in just a few minutes.
Good evening, I'm Harry Keeling, and on behalf of Alaska Public Media and the Alaskan Aviation Safety Foundation, welcome to Hangar Flying. This evening our guest is a pilot with over 20,000 hours flying a wide variety of air machines, from C-130s to probably every version of the 737 to his own Cessna 182. Jim Robinson's done a lot of flying. Jim, welcome back to Hangar Flying.
Thank you, Harry.
Jim, when you were first on the show a few years ago, you were talking about flying the 737 and your aircraft at the time, which was a 180. But tonight I'd like to actually have a hands-on session with you, talking about some of the latest technology that you're using in your 182. Our audience, as you know, are pilots and aviation enthusiasts around the state. Most fly small single-engine aircraft. Some will be very familiar with this technology, some will not have seen it at all. So let's begin with your display.
Well, Harry, what I've got here is an iPad mini, and this is going to be mounted in my airplane. And you know, there's two basic functions I'd like to discuss with you: is the pre-flight portion of the capability of this machine pre-flight, and then also taking this and putting it in your airplane and then flying with another piece of equipment, the Stratus.
Now you have to load in their software, right?
Yes, you have to load the software, and if you choose to use the Stratus, you have to buy that and then load that software in also.
And you're using ForeFlight, right?
Correct.
Okay, and that's an annual subscription.
It's an annual subscription. You know, I'm used to ForeFlight. There's a lot of different vendors out there. Garmin has a really good system. I'm used to ForeFlight, and that's what I'm using.
Okay.
So there's a lot of people that do this.
All right, go ahead.
Well, what I put on this iPad is I loaded a hypothetical flight to Fairbanks, and what you can do is you've got the Wi-Fi connection. You need Wi-Fi connection, then you can get all your weather and all your data. So you're sitting at the coffee shop or sitting in your car if you have a telephone connection, and you're doing all your pre-flight planning. So what I've got in here is you can kind of see it. It's a hypothetical flight from Anchorage International to Talkeetna and then on up to Fairbanks. I could show you the entire route. And this is on a sectional also. I might add you could do this as an IFR, or yeah, you could do an IFR with a high or low altitude chart. But for our purposes, this will be a VFR flight.
And that's getting a live feed, is that correct? Is that why it's pulsing?
It's getting a live feed right now. It's picking up a GPS through the Stratus, and it needs Wi-Fi to do the up-to-date weather, and I don't think, excuse me, we need Wi-Fi to get the up-to-date weather, which we're not getting right now.
So now if you take your iPad and you take it out to your airplane, does the Stratus provide a Wi-Fi connectivity to get the weather?
Yes, with the Stratus, this is Stratus right here. This is the box that you'll have to mount in your airplane, and basically it's you've got some lights on it that shows what it has going on. If it's picking up GPS to the satellite, also if it's picking up ADS-B. So right in the building, it's not picking up the ADS-B, so we lose that capability. But in your airplane, airborne, it will. You mount this somewhat along the longitude of the airplane, this box. It doesn't have to be level. It's just got to be along the longitude of the airplane. And then that will feed all this data into this box, and via a Wi-Fi signal that the computer knows about, we'll put it onto your iPad.
So you're getting near real-time weather on the iPad display in your airplane?
Yes.
Okay.
One of the problems they've had in the lower 48 is it's near real time. It's great in X-rad weather. It'll give you thunderstorm information, but it's about 5 minutes old. This is not for weather avoidance. But a 5-minute-old thunderstorm, you should be avoiding it by a long ways. So it's a very capable machine. You know, looking at the screen here, we are getting our position. You see that blue dot right here. It knows it's picking up the position right here. So it is picking up some capability with the GPS.
And you can, I think you demonstrated this a moment ago, you can shrink down or enlarge the map for whatever level of detail you want, right?
Exactly. One of the things you can do with this is, just like your iPad, you can shrink it or enlarge it. So this is the hypothetical flight is starting at Anchorage International, and you can see this right here. Now, see, we're clear over here at KAKM, over here at APU campus. That's where it thinks it is, but you know the flight is planned for here, so we take off from here. This is all the runway and all the data that the machine puts on here for you to keep your runway straight.
Well, let's do this, Jim. We've got actually less than a minute to go. I want to get you back on the program, but can you just show us real briefly maybe a letdown plate?
A what now?
A approach plate?
Oh, sure. Let me go.
And what we'll do next time is we'll look at the traffic advisory function and also the AHARS.
Yeah, let me see. I've got the thing loaded in. Let me.
Tell you what, I'm going to run out of time, so we'll do that next time as well. We'll probably get a couple more programs because this is very interesting and a good demonstration of what you actually have.
Sure, you bet.
So, ladies and gentlemen, I hope you enjoyed tonight's program. I want you to tune in next time. We're going to have Jim Robinson back on, pick up where we left off, and we'll talk a little bit more about the capabilities available to you now as a GA pilot with the iPad mini or similar technologies. So until next time, fly safe.
Thanks, Harry. We'll see you again on Monday. As we look at today's sea ice edge as analyzed by the Alaska Sea Ice Desk, you'll notice that white edge. I've kind of changed the colors a little bit today to indicate where that leading edge of ice strips is and where the actual concentrated ice is. That's more of a solid or mostly solid ice pack. So the white edge is the leading edge of the ice strips, and that's about 7 nautical miles or so from the northern end of St. Paul. The overall ice pack has been moving south and southeast about 5 to 7, maybe even 10 nautical miles a day. So it is closing in on St. Paul. We'll see how close it gets over the weekend, and I'll continue to share these images with you again on Saturday and Sunday. So if you're watching from the Pribilofs or from the crabbing fleet, you have a better idea of where that's going there. Anytime you want, you can go to weather.gov/anchorage/ice.php, and you can download the shape files and things to map this in Google Earth or whatever tool you like to analyze the latest ice edge analysis and the 5-day forecast. So you can certainly check that out. Here's a wider view of the Bering, and you can see the continental shelf right here. There's the ice edge south of St. Matthew, and then the strips not too far south and southwest of St. Matthew there. So if what I've done today helps you out, let me know. Let the Sea Ice team know that you like how I presented this here, or if you don't like it at all. But if there's ways that we can present this better for you, please let us know, because we're all about trying to make this usable and important for you out in there in the Bering Sea, especially around St. Paul as the ice gets closer and closer. For southeastern Alaska, a southerly flow continues for you as we head into the weekend. A south wind around 20 knots or so south and west of Sitka, 13-foot seas there outside of Cross Sound and Gustavus. A southerly flow outside of Yakutat at 25 knots, and winds going south in the Lynn Canal as well, up to 30 knots there with a 6-foot sea by Sunday. A broader southeasterly flow sweeping over southeast Alaska. Winds still southerly in the Lynn Canal, otherwise 25 to 30 knots along the coast with 8 to 11-foot seas and 2 to 5-foot seas there across some of the southern inner waterways for Saturday and Sunday. For Saturday in south central, a north and northeasterly wind coming down Cook Inlet over the ice, 25 to 35 knots, and a broader easterly flow still working into the western part of the Gulf. For Prince William Sound, 20 knots there with a 4-foot sea. Notice the winds, though, coming in from the west out across Kodiak Island because of that circulation sitting right about here in the Gulf. As we get into Sunday, that backs up a little bit more and the winds become even stronger there. 40 to 45 knots coming into the Barren Islands, 13-foot seas, 40 to 45 knots coming across Kodiak Island. We keep winds out of the northeast for Cook Inlet, and easterlies inside of Prince William Sound at 20 knots with a 4-foot sea. For the Alaska Peninsula, light and variable flow north of Cold Bay and the Bering Sea coast, northeasterlies in Bristol Bay, and a south and southwesterly wind across the Pacific coast at 20 to 25 knots for Saturday. For Sunday, an east and northeasterly wind coming across the entire peninsula, 35 knots on the Bering Sea coast, 40 knots on the Pacific coast with seas at 16 to 18 feet. For the Aleutians, light and variable winds north of Unalaska for Saturday, but otherwise it's a north and northeasterly wind all the way out toward Shemya. At 15 to 30 knots or so, we're expecting 9 to 14-foot seas across the Bering and anywhere from 6 to 10-foot seas with more of a southeasterly flow south of Unalaska and Nikolsky for Saturday. You see that changes a little bit as we get into Sunday with a broader north and easterly wind taking over the central and eastern chain. Out across the west, it's still blowing from the northeast at 25 to 30 knots with 9 to 11-foot seas as we close out the weekend. For the west, that north and easterly wind is going to keep working that ice edge a little bit further southward again, anywhere from 5 to about 10 nautical miles a day or so, as it's been this week. North and easterly winds at 20 to 25 knots, 30 knots out around St. Matthew, and 20 knots for the Pribilofs, with a 6-foot sea on Saturday. By Sunday, that's a little bit more of an easterly shift. That might slow the ice down a little bit closer to the Pribilofs if it hasn't made it there yet. 4-foot seas there on Sunday, with northeasterlies north of Nunivak Island, and northerlies continue coming out of the Bering and over St. Lawrence Island at 25 knots. For the north coast, north and east winds should be light for the Beaufort Seacoast. That should greatly improve how the weather feels. It might actually feel like the temperature it is. Of course, at 10 knots, that's still at least a little bit of a breeze, and that will give you a wind chill. Northeasterlies coming down the Chukchi coast at 15 to 25 knots. Northerlies inside of Kotzebue Sound blowing at 25 knots. Very little change there for Sunday. Slightly stronger winds around Cape Lisburn and Point Hope. Otherwise, a broad easterly flow sweeps across the Beaufort Seacoast, passes Barrow and into the Chukchi Sea at around 15 to 25 knots at its strongest point. Let's recap your weekend weather. As we go into tonight, expect a slowing, dying front across the northern and eastern Gulf Coast to continue the chances for rain for southeast and across the northern Gulf Coast, with low pressure backing up toward Kodiak Island and the southern Kenai Peninsula, though. We should expect some areas of turbulence and stronger winds to develop across the northern and western coast as we go into the weekend. Light snow is expected in the Copper River Basin, maybe some light accumulations for the western Brooks Range, and some breezes there blowing around the snow. And blowing and drifting snow is possible over the ice edge, and some scattered snow showers will continue for the Pribilofs as we head through the weekend. Look for rain and snow showers to mix across south central as we head into Saturday, but overall it's the warmer weather that you'll be talking about, and many in the west will be seeing that as we head into the next several weeks as well, as a broader southerly flow sweeps more moisture and more heat into southern and western parts of Alaska. That's your Alaska weather tonight. Stay safe. We'll see you.
These forecasts are to be used for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
The National Weather Service.